and welcome to another Science Festival event. Caithness International Science Festival has been running all of March. To begin with, just waiting for all our attendees to sign up. We've had over 200 sign-ups today. So I am going to plug the activity book, which we've put together. It is available for download from our website, www.science03.org. Or if you're lucky enough, you might still find one at Tesco's or Lidl's in Wick or Thurso in Caithness. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight and also welcome you to tonight's Science Festival event. The talk is entitled Trouble with Lichens. My name is Elena Koppanenbeke. I'm the Secretary of Science 03, which is the charity which runs the Science Festival. And here with me tonight, also from Science 03, are Garance Warburton. Hi, Garance, and Festival Coordinator Nicola MacLeod. So before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. This event is being recorded, but your screens are not being recorded. It's been a very popular event, so we have, please would you direct all your questions through the Q&A. That's the little thingy at the bottom of your screen. And Mike will answer as many as he can at the end of the presentation. Now, as an audience, you can upvote your questions. So if there is a question that someone else has asked and you're keen to have answered, just give it the thumbs up and it'll move up the list. So tonight, we're delighted to welcome back Dr. Mike Sims. He's a geologist, a curator in the Department of Natural Sciences at the National Museums of Northern Ireland. Mike has more than 150 scientific publications to his name, mostly covering topics of geology, fossils, meteorites, and lichens. And we've been very lucky to be able to hear Mike present on some of these topics during this festival. If you missed those talks, they are available to view on our website, www.science03.org. Mike's earlier talks were entitled Meteorites and the Solar System and Hunting for an Impact Crater in Scotland. So I'll now hand over to Mike for this evening's presentation, Trouble with Lichens.
Great, right, thank you very much. Right now, I was a bit wary about this share screen. Oh, where is it? That one, I think. Yes, there we go. Right, well, this is all about trouble with lichen, and the trouble with lichens is that most people don't really know anything about them. They're never taught anything about them. So what I'm going to do really this evening is actually go through and show you what wonderful and interesting organisms they are and how incredibly useful they are in terms of telling us about aspects of the environment, and they have other practical uses as well, and also explain what they are and where you find them and so on and so forth. If it can move. Right, well, lichens, the thing is they're a Cinderella group. Not many people look at them, and so they're often actually lumped together with other what we call lower plants, but the thing is they're not plants. Grasses, ferns and mosses are plants, lichens are not. Lichens are actually fungi, and they're living in partnership with algae, and you can see the book on the left there, British Fungi, with a chapter on lichens, which was published in about 1910. So this guy, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, and sort of cotton on to the fact, really you should include these in books on fungi, not in books with grasses and mosses and things like that. So what are they? Lichens are actually they're fungi that, in effect, they've sort of discovered agriculture. What they're doing, they are nurturing algal cells within a fungal kind of massive hyphae. So it's a symbiosis. It's two quite distinct partners living together with benefit to both sides, as it were. So The alga benefits by actually being protected from drying out by the fungi that surrounds it. And in return, the algae, because it is photosynthesizing, it's making sugars from carbon dioxide and water, it gives a little bit of that back to the sort of fungus. So it's a really, really beneficial partnership. So effectively, it's this partnership between a fungus and an alga, but it's actually a bit more complicated than that, because I say alga, but some of them are actually blue-green algae, which are cyanobacteria. So that's another quite separate sort of kingdom. And in fact, you might have 2 or 3 different partners all working together in partnership within the lichen symbiosis. And most lichens, most of the ones that we come across, belong to what we would call the jelly fungi, or ascomycetes. And you sort of see these quite often. The scarlet elf cup is a classic one that you see. And only a very small number actually belong to what's called the basidiomycetes, which are the familiar sort of toadstools. So most of them are ascomycetes. And in fact, 40% of all ascomycetes are actually lichenized. They've got algae within them. So it's not such an unusual thing for the jelly fungi to do. And these structures that we see, particularly in the autumn, I suppose, toadstools, such like, these are the structures that they produce spores. And that is how fungi disperse to new locations, because spores are incredibly small, so they could be blown by the wind. They get pretty much everywhere. And you see the same sort of structures in lichen shapes. I'll tell you a little bit about lichen shapes, actually, because they come in quite a range of different types. You've got over on the left, you've got shrubby ones. These are kind of very descriptive terms. Then leafy lichens, stringy lichens, which actually do have almost a little strand of quite tough string down the middle of them. Lichens which form almost like little tubes, so I call them tubey lichens. And amongst these are the pixie cups, the devil's matchsticks, and the reindeer moss. You can see devil's matchstick, you see a few little bits of the kind of reindeer moss, or reindeer lichen, I should say, just there. And then, of course, you've got the crusty lichens, the ones which are really stuck firmly to the substrate, whether it be rock or tree bark, or whatever. So they come in really quite a wide range of shapes. And they grow in many, many different habitats. And I've just really picked a few here, you see, to show that you get different lichens on different types of rocks, be that limestone or granite or sandstone. They will support different types of lichen. And then you'll have different types of lichen growing on peat bogs or on soil or on trees, and different types of trees, different species of trees have different types of lichens, or tend to support different types of lichen. And some of them are very, very specific to locations. So you get some lichens, this thing called Ramalina siliquosa, which is a seashore lichen. And you can see, well, it grows mostly around the seashore. There's a funny little bit in the middle there, and I'll say something about that a bit later. Things in wet woodlands, and I'll talk about these wet woodlands later on. You can see, northwest of Scotland or west of Scotland is fantastic for these things that like it wet. And then you've got some other lichens that are found really rather exclusively on upland rocks. So you've got them up in the highlands, and others such as this thing down here, which really likes dry sunlit limestone. It's really a sort of Mediterranean type thing. So it's mostly found down here in the south of England. Now, how do they actually get around? How did lichens spread from one place to another? Well, I showed that there were toadstools and the Ascomyces jelly fungi produce spores. Well, a lot of lichens actually have structures that also produce fungal spores. And you can see some of them here, very, very conspicuous little discs. And these produce fungal spores. But remember, the lichen is a symbiosis between a fungus and an alga. So you can't just go out there with just the fungal spores. You've got to have the algal cells as well, or the thing is not going to work. So where do they get the algal cells from? What's a lonely lichen spore to do if it lands somewhere? Well, it turns out there's actually plenty of algae out there already. And even though there's probably 1,500 different species of lichens in Britain and Ireland, there's probably only about 20 or 30 different types of alga that are involved in this partnership. So you see the same algae cropping up again and again and again in different species of lichen. So you've got Pleurococcus, which is a green alga, and then the thing which is very, very, very widespread, thing called Trentipolia, which is this kind of orange, rusty orange color you get on a lot of trees, it's actually a green alga, though you wouldn't think so to look at it. So these lichen spores can land on places where there may already be free living algae, and so they can effectively pirate those and establish themselves as fully qualified lichens. But there's another way that they can actually spread themselves about. You've got these discs producing the fungal spores, but they need to find the algal cells. But another way is to produce little powdery bits which contain both of the ingredients. These are called cerealia, and you can see them on this one. Some lichens only have these disc producing spores, some only have the powdery patches. In this case, it actually does both. So it's belt and braces, you see. And these consist, if you look on this little diagram here, this is where these got little powdery bits contain a few algal cells and a few fungal hyphae. So it's ready-made bits of lichen. And so where they land, they can sort of set off. They don't need to sort of look around, as it were, to find algal cells. So that's two of the main ways that lichens actually disperse themselves: spores, or by these little bits of powder, which are the kind of ready-made lichen propagules. Well, lichens colour the world, and you may not sort of think, oh, I'm sure they don't. Well, they do. One of the things is that very often you don't actually see what the genuine colour of rocks or tree bark or whatever it is. And this is, there are some patches here. As a geologist, so I'm always looking around, oh, what's this rock here? But very often it's completely covered by all these kind of lichens, orange and green and such like. And even this black over here, that's a lichen as well. All the rocks there down near the sort of water covered by black lichen. So it can be difficult to actually see what the real rock colour is. That's why geologists are all going around with a hammer hitting pieces off. So they really do colour the world. And some of the colours are absolutely amazing. These are a couple of examples from somewhere over the east of Scotland, actually, Abernethy, I think. This amazing yellow colour. And then another couple, this is a very common one here. This is called the map lichen, Rhizocarpum geographicum. I should say one of the problems is that most lichens don't have common names. So you have to kind of get to know your Latin name. So Rhizocarpum geographicum, it's called the map lichen because it's a sort of shade of greeny yellow that was very common in maps, atlases in the past. And a lot of these colours are actually due to particular lichen chemicals which are unique to lichens. They're not really found in any other organisms, and potentially they do have uses, perhaps in sort of medicine and well, who knows what the possibilities are. Lots and lots of different chemicals unique to lichens. And this is a local hero, local to me as it were, Ballymena in County Antrim, Matilda Knowles. And she was the first person to actually recognise that when you go down to rocky shores, the rocks really are coloured and they're colour coded. And it's where you see the world being coloured by lichens more clearly than anywhere else. And this is actually, I think this is up near Applecross. This is a boulder showing the 3 zones that you get on rocky seashores. And you have a black zone here, and that's dominated by lichens of a type called Verrucaria marans, triaxula and such like. And then above that, you have an orange zone, and that's dominated by species of lichens called Caloplaca and Xanthoria. There's a little bit of Xanthoria got up there. And then above that, you have a grey zone, which contains a much higher diversity of lichens, some of which you'll find well away from the sea. The black ones you will only find on seashores. Some of the orange ones you will also find only on seashores, but some you'll find further away. But a lot of the grey ones you'll find miles away. She was the first person to actually recognise this, and you see this everywhere. Anywhere you go on a rocky seashore of not limestone, limestone's not so good for this, but all the other rocks, granite, sandstone, or whatever, you will see this zonation. And if you're up on Shetland and places there where it gets a bit kind of windswept, you'll find this zonation is stretched over perhaps 10 or 20 meters of the cliffs. Whereas here in this kind of quiet loch, it's all encompassed in just one boulder. And as I was saying, it colours the rocks, it colours the trees as well. What colour is the actual colour of this bark of this oak tree? It's difficult to tell. It's so thickly covered with lichens. A few of them are colourful. You've got this little orange one up here. This is a thing called Xanthoria ukrainica. but a lot of them are kind of dull, browny, creamy, grey sort of colours. But they have a trick up their sleeve, or rather the lichenologist has a trick up his sleeve. If you add certain chemicals, put a little tiny drop of a chemical onto the lichen, some of them actually change colour to a very distinctive shade. So two of the main chemicals that are used are potassium hydroxide and sodium hypochlorite. And this is a dull looking lichen, but by putting a little bit of potassium hydroxide in it, just a little drop, it turns bright red. And that's one of these lichen chemicals reacting with the potassium hydroxide produce this reaction. And these reactions are very, very distinctive. They're one of the diagnostic features lichenologists use to figure out what on earth it is they're looking at. So it might be different. Sometimes it might turn purple, yellow, orange, or whatever. In this case, it's red. You look in the big book of lichens, and it says, oh yes, Purchasera Cracodes turns red with potassium hydroxide. So you're using commonplace chemicals to react with lichen chemicals to give you a clue as to what on earth this thing is amongst the 1,500 or so lichens you have to choose from. And universally, these lichen chemicals have actually been used for centuries, almost certainly, for actually dyeing wool and textiles and such like. And this is Morag scraping lichens off the rocks near the coast, somewhere around the Outer Hebrides, to make dye. And this is a guy, probably kind of medieval times. It's been used for a sort of long time, and you get quite a range of different colours here. You see, you've got, I think, Azalia rubicunda gives you different colours, the Theria vulpina. So you get a range of different colours. There are a few books being written about it, and Harris tweed, of course, is coloured using lichen dyes. One of the problems with some of these really beautiful bright colours is that they aren't very colour fast in strong light. So you don't want to be going out in bright sunlight, but that may not be such a problem in some of the more windswept parts of Scotland. So the lichen chemicals are actually being used for dyeing textiles for centuries. And lichens, they give a sort of colour to things, but they also give a sort of a kind of mottled appearance, and they do really impart a sense of age. And this is something I'm really, really passionate about, is that you look at these walls. This is on Devonish Island in County Fermanagh. This is an early Christian site, so it's about 1,000 years old, kind of various monasteries and such like. And all the stones are sort of mottled with all these different sorts of lichens. Okay, they're not wildly colourful, but you look at it and you immediately know this building has been here a long, long time. And you see these marvellous carvings here with this sort of mosaic of different lichens. Absolutely so beautiful. And I was actually sent here to investigate, are the lichens damaging the archaeology? And my conclusion was, looking at all these things, that for the most part, no, they weren't. There was one slab that was actually suffering damage, but otherwise, the lichens really don't do damage to these archaeological monuments. So they're really important. They give things a sense of age, which you wouldn't get otherwise. And going even further back in time, 5,000 years ago, and Stonehenge, of course, is quite well known, and it's quite well known amongst lichenologists because it supports a really, really rich flora. Because basically, these stones have been sticking up in the air into the wind for 5,000 years up out on Salisbury Plain. And so they've gathered quite a diverse flora of lichens. There's about 80 or 90 different species on there. And now anybody who's been to Stonehenge will realise it's not actually anywhere near the coast. But these green tufty lichens on here, these were a thing called Ramalina silicosa. These are seashore lichens. That's a bit odd. It's one of the odd things you find actually with siliceous rocks that are stuck up in the air for several thousand years way inland. They do tend to accumulate these coastal lichens, which is a bit odd. So it's really great. There's a great diversity of lichens here, which is reflecting the age of it. They've been there a long time, so they built up quite a diversity of different species. And you can see things close to Scotland. Well, here we are in Kilmartin Glen, which is a fantastic place. More standing stones and archaeological monuments that you can shake a stick at. And this is a fantastic big sandstone slab here. And you can see it's just covered with different lichens. And it's got this kind of mosaic that's quite clearly, this stone has been there a long, long time, basically accumulating lichen spores and little bits of those powdery bits of lichens catching those. And so there's probably at least 30, 35 species on there you'd be able to identify. Well, you might struggle to identify them, but I can tell you there's probably 30, 35 different types there. It's the diversity and the size of the patches is telling you that these stones have been there a long time. And you can see these are just a few examples. And this is a little coastal one. So we actually know we're near the coast here. So I think these are really, really great things. They're a testament to how long they've been there. The lichens are telling you these things have been in the landscape for thousands of years. So of course you go to Callanish Stone Circle, Isle of Lewis, the most famous of all. Again, 5,000 years they've been sticking up into the wind, catching lichen spores, lichen propagules. And I went there a few years ago with my good friend Jeff, and I was so disappointed. You can see there is caught little bits of this coastal lichen, Ramalina silicosa, and a few other bits, but they, at some point in the mid 80s to mid 90s, all of the lichens were removed from the Callanish stones. They were scrubbed clean, probably with bleach or something like that. They even poison around the bottom of the stones. You can see they've actually poisoned the grass. And you can see there's little lichens struggling to get back. You can tell from the size of these that this event happened probably about 30, 35 years ago. And I think it's tragic. There's nothing to me at Callanish that tells you that these stones have been here longer than 30 or 40 years. So you have to believe what the panels are telling you, whereas the lichens would tell you that quite independently. I think it's a terrible shame. Anyway, enough of that. Okay, so going back to those little tiny lichens that are trying to sort of get a foothold back on the Callanish stones, how fast do lichens actually grow? Because I said, well, those little patches suggest it's been 30, 40 years since they were eradicated. Well, some grow really, really slowly. And this is one of the things a lot of people think, oh, lichens grow really slowly. And it's true that some of them do, but not all of them. Some of them actually grow pretty fast. Some grow slow. A lot of the crustose lichens, particularly on rocks, grow, you're less than 2 millimeters a year. This is a thing called white patches on limestone, Aspergillia calcarea. It grows on calcareous rocks. And it's got a fairly kind of constant growth rate. And so I can tell that these here, this one's probably about 50, 60 years old, something like that. By looking at gravestones and bits of rock that we know when they were first sort of put in the landscape, and then measuring the size of the biggest of these lichen patches, we can basically put together sort of a graph to figure out how fast these things grow. And these grow quite slowly. But some others actually grow quite fast. And these are the reindeer lichens, which is a whole big group of lichens under the genus Cladonia. And these grow fairly fast. Well, they have to, because they've been eaten by reindeer all the time. Not here, this is in Northern Ireland, in County Down, not many reindeer there now. But so they do grow quite fast. You're talking more than 2, 3, 4 centimeters a year. And a lot of the lichens that grow on trees, again, they're growing reasonably fast, particularly the shrubby ones, and leafy ones. They'll grow reasonable sort of pace. So don't think all lichens grow very slowly, because some actually grow pretty fast enough that you can kind of eat them one year and there'll be more back the following year. And this growth rate that's been worked out for certain types of crustose lichen has actually led to a sort of science called lichenometry. They're sort of working out how long a rock surface has been exposed by measuring the size of lichens. This is this map lichen again, Rhizocarpum geographicum. It's quite a slow growing thing. So you can measure this, and by plotting it against graphs of lichens of known age, you can work out how long that's been there. And this is actually the Rollright stones in Oxfordshire. This is my son a while ago, about 16 years ago actually now. My wife introducing him to the lichens on the Rollright stones. It's not a precise method at all for telling how old these things are. But what it can do, and as it did in the case of this, it can tell you which stones have been messed around with in the past, because some may have actually fallen over and then been put back upright. And so they will have smaller lichens on than those that have been upright throughout the history of the thing. So it's, as I say, there's a paper here, science or pseudoscience. So some people are skeptical, others think it's quite good. It's a useful technique, but you can't be too precise with it. So I'm talking about the ages of lichens and using some of these lichens which clearly can sort of survive and grow very slowly for hundreds of years, which brings me almost to the title of the talk, Trouble with Lichen, which was the book by John Wyndham. And it was based on a story where a chemical had been extracted from lichens, which was found to slow the aging process. And then there was all sorts of intrigue associated with that. And of course, that's, well, who knows with these lichen chemicals what somebody might find. But anyway, there are other ways to actually slow aging or appear to slow your aging using lichens. And this middle picture here, this is a kind of one of these kind of hairy lichens. This is up in up near Aberdeen, actually, somewhere. And it's a sort of dark colour. And in the past, 200-300 years ago, people would actually, or women would actually weave this into their hair, you see, to give their hair a darker colour. And there's another one called, this is called Bryoria, there's another one called Alectoria, which is much paler. And so again, they could weave this into their hair and give their hair a sort of paler appearance, more blonde sort of appearance. It's not very sophisticated. And then I came across this. I don't know what this is about. Lichen professional, black hair returns soon. I don't know. I'm sure this guy's a really, really nice guy, but he does look a bit sinister. So there are ways to use lichens for slowing your aging, but not actually in reality. It's just an appearance of youth, maybe several hundred years ago. So are lichens useful? Well, they are useful. If you're a model railway enthusiast, they're immensely useful. How would you make all those little trees and bushes and things like that? And because these kind of reindeer lichen type cladonias grow quite fast, the amount that's taken for model railway enthusiasts is not going to actually cause their extinction. I wouldn't encourage over collecting, but so they are useful in that respect. And they're also used for homes for birds, for instance, because you can knit these things together and make really kind of quite effective nests using some of these stringy and bushy lichens. And then they're used in some sort of decorations, as you can see there. Food. Well, yes, you can if you're desperate. There's a type of lichen called rock tripe. It's a thing called Umbilicaria mamulata. There's a few Umbilicarias. And yes, you can eat them, but they taste horrible. But if you're really, really desperate, and these tend to be kind of in rather sort of northern climes, up mountains, such like. So there may be not much food around, so that may be all you've got. And then there's food for reindeer, and the food in large areas of Russia and Scandinavia is now hot food for reindeer because of Chernobyl reactor in 1986, I think, and it deposited vast amounts of radioactive isotope, particularly cesium-137, and the lichens tend to take up some of these radioactive isotopes, and still you will find that these lichens, the reindeer lichens there, have higher than background levels of these radioactive isotopes, which is a problem if you're a reindeer herder or you want to eat reindeer. So yeah, food for people, maybe, definitely food for reindeers, but problems associated with them taking up all this radioactive stuff. But they're also food for lots of little tiny critters. So if you circle around in amongst patches of lichens, you'll come up with all sorts of little sort of insects and arthropods, such like, and particularly these things called oribated mites. So the whole little ecosystems within patches of lichens. So that in itself is a whole separate talk, which I'm not qualified to speak on. So worth getting a hand lens out and peering at some of these things close up to see these little delightful little oribated mites wandering around. So, well, you can also, as well as kind of using it as food, you can actually use it to make food safe, as it were, because there are some lichens which contain a thing called usnic acid. Usnia is the one particularly that contains usnic acid, and it's actually antimicrobial, it's antibacterial. And almost certainly that is an adaptation to stop bacteria actually doing damage to the lichen, but it's actually been used by people for quite a long time. So usnic acid has been added to curries and such like for for a long time. But of course, there are all sorts of issues with it now, health and safety and such like. So there's whole things about, is it safe? And what are the side effects? And you would say, well, it's natural, but is it safe? So lichens are producing, again, more chemicals. You've got ones that produce colors, and you've got ones here that are producing antimicrobial agents. So again, potential medical uses. So that's for killing bacteria, but you can kill bigger things if you want to. You can kill wolves and foxes. And this is a lichen called Litharia vulpina, the wolf lichen, and it's poisonous. It actually has been used in the past to kill wolves and foxes. And what's actually happening here, remember that lichens are a fungus, and you may also be aware that some fungus, some familiar toadstools, things called got names like Death Cap and Destroying Angel. Well, there's a clue in the name there. These things kill you. And so because lichens are a sort of fungus, potentially they do have the potential to actually be really quite toxic. And it turns out with this Litharia, it actually contains some what's called Basidiomyces yeast fungi within the other sort of fungal things. And that's almost certainly what is producing this vulpinic acid, the wolf killing component. So don't eat that one, but you won't find it anywhere in the UK, which is a shame because it's a lovely lichen. Well, onto nicer things, lichens and perfume. You thought, really? Yes, actually, there's a lichen called Evernia prunastri, often called the oak moss. Very, very common. Grows on trees. Grows quite fast. So in parts of the south of France, it can be harvested 2 or 3 times a year. So that gives you an idea of the speed that things growing. And an extract from Evernia actually is used as a fixative for expensive perfumes, so that it means that the scent actually lingers rather than just within 20 minutes it's gone. The expensive ones actually use this extract from oak moss from Evernia. But again, there's all the problems with sort of health and safety. What exactly is in these chemicals? Is it good for people or whatever? So will a ban on oak moss kill the French perfume industry? Well, who knows? So that's lichens and perfume. So you can see there's quite a range of uses. Lichens and litmus paper and drink. Well, this is actually down the Isle of Portland, which is an absolute mecca for lichenologists. It's a fantastic sort of place, but about as far away from Caithness as you can get, actually. And on these big limestone boulders, sometimes you find these little patches, these little kind of tufty, kind of almost like browny, purpley sort of lichens here. And this thing called Roxella phycopsis, or Keller. And if you kind of boil up these particular lichens and create an infusion, and then you soak paper in it, you can actually create litmus paper. And litmus paper is that stuff you might remember from kind of O-level chemistry that tells you whether it's acid or alkaline. It changes color from red to blue or blue to red. So that is the source of the key ingredient in litmus paper. So what's that got to do with drink? Well, this lichen, Roxella, it occurs in various places all around the sort of south coast of Britain and parts of South Wales and on the Channel Islands and such like. And must be 40, 50 years ago or so, it was thought it ought to also occur somewhere on the kind of southwest coast of Ireland. And so basically an offer was put out by members of the British Lichen Society or the committee or whatever, said that whosoever should find Roxella in Ireland, in Southern Ireland, will be entitled to claim a bottle of whiskey. And the bottle of whiskey is still there. Nobody's claimed it. It's one of those odd things you think it perhaps ought to be there, but nobody has found it, and it's not for want of looking. Okay, well, going on to air quality, a lot of people know that lichens are an indicator of air quality. They say, well, if there's lots of lichens, it must mean the air is good quality, and that's not strictly true. It comes from really going back to the Industrial Revolution up until about the 1950s, 1960s, when it looked like this. You had huge factory chimneys and domestic coal fires pouring out vast amounts of smoke, very high levels of sulfur dioxide, And lichens and fungi and mosses and such like do not like sulfur dioxide. So in the big industrial conurbations, you've got kind of up in the kind of northwest of England, you've got Liverpool, Manchester, and they've got Birmingham and London, such like. It pretty well wiped out all but the most hardy of lichens. All that you had were these kind of really, really tough crustose lichens, just a handful of species that could actually survive. And you had to go away from these smoky conurbations to actually get back to anything that resembled a reasonably diverse lichen flora with crusty, leafy, shrubby, hairy lichens and such like. But of course, things have changed because Clean Air Act has come in, so we don't really have this problem with sulfur dioxide anymore. This is the lichen that in those parts of the Midlands, English Midlands, you would have just seen a lot of, and you wouldn't see much else. Lecanora conisioides, the pollution lichen. It loved sulfur dioxide. And you think, well, what did it do before the Industrial Revolution? Well, there's volcanoes. Volcanoes actually produce quite a lot of sulfur dioxide. So it would have been a rarity hanging around volcanoes. And then its moment came with the Industrial Revolution, and it spread everywhere. And since the Clean Air Act has sort of come in and we don't have the same levels of sulfur dioxide, it has retreated. And so now it's not something you see terribly often. The problem now that's taken over really is ammonia, NH3. And you just have to sort of go outside when they're muck spreading, and you can really smell the effect of this. It's a really, really big pollution problem. And it mostly comes from slurry produced by dairy herds, and the farmers have got to get rid of it somehow, so they fling it all over the place, as you can see, and it's a real problem, and people are not really aware of it as much as they should do. This is a map of essentially airborne pollutants, so ammonia, and it's what's called the nitrogen loading, and you can see up in Caithness, it's great, it's just fine, it's not exceeded. But that's about it. And you got, the Outer Hebrides is fine, but you go further south from there and you go to some of these places and it's desperate. This is more than 28 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. That's a lot of nitrogen. And Northern Ireland's, desperate. There's a few little tiny corners right over in Fermanagh where it's still sort of okay. This is giving you an idea of the scale of airborne pollution that we are suffering in the UK. And it really is a problem. And it affects people's health. It's not just the lichens, it certainly affects the lichens, but it affects people as well. And you can see, not only can you smell it sometimes, but you can see it. And this is what you see. These two particular lichens, it's a thing called Xanthoria paritina, and there's a couple called Physcia ascendens and Tenella. The grey one is Physcia, the orange one is Xanthoria, and you just see it everywhere. Now, this is actually the my home village. When I was walking around here sort of like 50 years ago, the trees didn't look like this, and now they all look like this. They are all orange and grey. They are just completely swamped by these two or three species lichens, and you don't see many others. And that's because of this nitrogen pollution that is so prevalent. And if you want to actually test, what's things like where you are, there's actually a leaflet you can download from OPAL, the Air Quality Survey. And it shows on the right, you've got the pollution gang, nitrogen loving, which are the orange ones and the grey ones. So you don't even have to, you can tell from 10 yards away, yes, things are bad here because it's orange and grey. And then at the other extreme, you've got the clean team, which is the stringy ones, the usneas and the Avernia, the oak moss, as it were, the one that gives, it's used for perfume, and a few others. And then things sort of in between. So that's a kind of useful thing to help you get into looking at lichens in terms of air quality. Climate change, well, I should say a bit about climate change because, actually as a geologist, when people say climate change, I say, well, yes, it does. And there is clear evidence that things have been changing with the lichens. They are showing evidence of warming climate over decades. This is a thing, this kind of greenish thing up here, thing called Flavopalmyliceridin. I told you they all have horrible names. This is 1994. It's a thing that really likes it kind of nice and dry and sunny. It's a sort of Mediterranean thing. And there's one little patch down there in Crom in County Fermanagh. And I remember when I first came over here about 25 years ago, I came across a little patch of it up here, and I was very, very excited, you see. Then you go to 2014 and things are, there's loads of it. It's really moved northwards and there's a lot more of it now. So this is an example of how the slight warming of our temperatures has actually enabled this thing to really kind of migrate northwards quite rapidly. Over the course of 20 years, you can see it's moved up into southern Scotland. It'll soon be in Caithness, I'm sure. Water quality. Well, I've said about air quality. They're a really good indicator of air quality. And they are, as well as in water quality, it's a kind of bit of a specialist area to see these lichens that grow in and around rivers. These are ones that grow within the zone that is seasonally flooded. So in winter, they're completely submerged, and in summer, that's the only time you can really see them. And you can see on these rocks here, this blackness here is a lichen, and there's a sort of grayish thing there, that's a lichen, and this kind of browny leafy thing, that's another lichen, and there's another one there, you see. So there's quite a range of different things. Really good water quality in rivers, you will expect to see quite a diversity of different lichens that are kind of restricted to that sort of habitat. But this is really unusual now. This is the Glenarm River in County Antrim, which is really, really fantastic. And it's also quite exceptional because most of the Northern Ireland rivers look like this, which is horrible. This is basically just an open sewers. Again, it's agricultural slurry, and it just gets into the streams and it effectively kills everything. It wipes out the lichens and it wipes out pretty much everything else as well, which is, I think, is terribly sad. And people are not aware of these sorts of issues. And so there's all sorts of protests against pollution. We'll poison our land, air and water, contaminated land, contaminated food. In Northern Ireland, we've got some big protests against the mining. Now, I'm not for fracking or for mining, but I don't think they can justify using these arguments that it will contaminate our land. Your land and water has been contaminated for decades and you've not noticed. We've got the air is contaminated with ammonia, so all the trees look like this, and so many of the rivers look like that. So I think it's a real shame. I think we protest on genuine things, not things that it's already too late. So onto something better. Yes, woodland continuity. This is all about how long has a wood been there continuously without being felled and then sort of growing up. And wood anemone is, if you ask some woodland ecologists, they'll say, oh yes, wood anemone, it's an indicator of ancient woodland that's been there for hundreds of years. And here we have on the Belfast Hills, here is some wood anemone, and there's not been any trees of any significance here for a long time. This is Belfast just down in the background. So is it that good an indicator? No, in a lot of places it isn't, because these things can survive in our climate without the trees. They don't mind. And so this is this ancient woodland. It's got this carpet of bluebells, which woodland ecologists would say, oh yes, that's ancient woodland indicator, but it's not really. The trees could have been felled and it could have been a treeless landscape for decades and the bluebells would have been fine, and then the trees grow back. So it gives the impression of being ancient woodland, but it isn't really. It's not got that continuity of woodland or continuity of tree cover. But the lichens, now they can tell you something different. These are lichen weeds. You get lots of these sort of, almost any trees, as long as they're not too polluted with ammonia, you'll get all these sorts of things. These are very, very common species. Nothing very exciting about them. But then you get certain types which are ancient woodland indicators. And these are lichens that take a long time to actually spread. And so you'll see a lot of these actually in some of the ancient woodlands in parts of Scotland, and also the New Forest and places like that. These are the sort of rather wetter sort of woodlands, and these are scarce. I get very excited when I see these. And then these are little things called pinhead lichens. You can see they look a bit like a pinhead. And these grow particularly down in southern woodlands like the New Forest and such like, on really quite dry old sort of trees. And they are telling you that these areas of woodland have actually had continuous tree cover for at least several hundred years. The thing is, if you remove the trees, you remove the lichens. And these lichens are very slow to migrate to new trees. And if there is no woodland nearby for them to migrate from, that's it. They're gone. They're not going to come back at all. So that's why they're so important. You can't have the ancient woodland lichens without having the ancient woodland itself, the ancient trees that have been there, tree cover that's been there for a long time. And that's why ancient trees are irreplaceable all the time. They said, oh, we'll cut them down and we'll plant you twice as many over there. And that's not the same. That's the equivalent. This is Devonish Island again. It's equivalent of, oh, we'll knock that down. We'll bulldoze that and we'll build you another one in breeze blocks. And no, it's not the same. True ancient woodland is irreplaceable, particularly now where the landscape has been so carved up, and so it's very difficult for these old woodland indicator lichens that are very slow to migrate to actually get into new bits of woodland. So it's a big problem. Every bit of ancient woodland that's destroyed, that's one more nail in the coffin for quite a few of the lichens. Go on to Scotland's rainforest. Scotland is internationally important for lichens, and it was really only appreciated quite recently how important these rainforests were, and that they were just hazel scrub or whatever, but in fact they contain a wealth of sort of species that are really internationally scarce. In Europe they really are. You just don't see them anywhere else. This is just typical rainforest lichens in Knapdale, where the beavers live, and I would get so excited if I came across any of these anywhere in Northern Ireland, and there they are almost like weeds. They just amazing things, and they're got these beautiful kind of leaden sort of grey colour and these big things that look like bits of kind of cabbage stuck on trees. They're called lobaria. So the rainforests of Western Scotland are really very, very important indeed. And well, how much is there? There's around about 30,000 hectares left, which apparently is slightly bigger than Edinburgh. But it's a very, very rare habitat where it's a very wet climate. It's not called rainforest for nothing. It rains a lot and the lichens need that sort of moisture. And there's a recent thing called the Alliance for Scotland's Rainforest that's been established to try and really increase awareness of these and help to protect them, because they are under threat. There's a whole range of invasive species. Also, they get more and more isolated. As I said, some of these lichens are very slow to move into new patches. So if they're kind of isolated from other patches, it's going to be difficult for some of these lichens to colonize new areas. And the two really big threats are these things, deer, which is Scotland is completely overrun with deer, and they are just eating everything. So there's very little regeneration in a lot of these forests. So the trees are getting older and older, and you're not getting the young growth which you need for the forest to actually be sustainable. And the other one is rhododendron. The rhododendron is just spreads and smothers everything, and it is a really, really, really big problem. It is a problem in Scotland, problem in Ireland as well. In Ireland, it's been said the only way to deal with it is to get the military in. Not to shoot the things, of course, but to get them in a big scale to uproot them and poison them and such like. So the rainforests are really important, but they are under threat. And these are just a few of them. Fantastic, beautiful lichens. Love them. I mean, I remember the first time I came across this one, I just, oh my goodness, yes, lovely things, which I never see in Northern Ireland. But I say that, and then this was about 15 years ago. This is a place called South Woodburn Glen. It's about 15 miles kind of east of Belfast, and I was just walking along here, just actually looking at the geology really, and I noticed there's some crags all along this side, and I noticed there was this kind of brown, kind of leafy lichen. It had these tiny little bright green bits on it, and I said, oh my goodness, it's a thing called Sticta canariensis. I told you they don't have good names, do they? Sticta canariensis is an extreme rainforest lichen. You only find it is really quite scarce. You can see these are the places it's been found. It's not very common at all. You only find it in the extreme west of Scotland, the west of Ireland, and near Carrickfergus. So it just goes to show, don't write off places, just think, oh no, I won't find anything here. It's a peculiar thing. It's survived, it's incredibly pollution sensitive, so it survived the Industrial Revolution in Belfast, and it's still here. It's a hint of what the lichens were like in Ireland sort of 400 or 500 years ago, and it has managed to survive in this deep gorge, which is a big waterfall at the top end, so the whole gorge is full of sort of fine mist, which I think is one of the things that kept it going. So I'm gonna almost finish up there. I was just saying, yeah, lichens are everywhere. There's what's not to like about them. The great thing about them is there's loads of different sorts. A lot of them are very colourful. They don't jump around or fly away like a lot of animals and birds and things are. You don't have to wait till spring for them to flower. You don't have to wait for autumn for them to produce fungus. They're there all the time, and they're quite static, and a lot of them are quite flat, so they're quite easy to sort of photograph. You might say they're a bit difficult to identify. Some of them are, and it might be a bit difficult to get your head around some of the names, but they're not too bad. And I think they're a great group. They're a Cinderella group. So you only have to get to know a few and you immediately become a sort of expert because there's not many other people looking at them. So it's a group to get into, I would say. And ways that you can do this, there are the British Lichen Society, of course, which is the foremost society, I would say, in the world, actually, for lichenologists. And it welcomes all lichenologists from complete sort of people who've just started right through to there's some people who are seriously good at lichens, but they're all really very, very helpful. I've been a member for more than 30 years, and I would thoroughly sort of recommend it. There's some lichens growing on the head of this child there. That's a concrete child, I should say. It's sad. But there's also some Facebook groups which are very helpful. There's one called Lichen Spotters UK, which is aimed very much at people that don't really know much about lichens, but they want to find out more. And so there are a few of us kind of with a bit more expertise, so we will help them to identify them and give clues as to, well, we think this is this because of these particular characters. And then, of course, there's one called Scottish Lichens, which I think you should all join if you're in Scotland. Which is the same sort of thing. You know, these are really good. They're lichenologists with a bit of experience helping other people to get into lichens. And then thirdly, there's this one, which is lichen identification, which has far more members, but this is a more worldwide thing. So it tends to be dominated by North American lichenologists, but you do see quite a few from the UK and Ireland. So I would say if you want to have a go, just go to these Facebook pages to sort of start off with, join these groups, send in pictures you find, and we will do our utmost to identify them and help you to get enthused about the group as I have been. I think I'll leave it there. Quite happy to answer some questions. Right.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was really interesting. I had no idea there was such a diversity of lichens. We have quite a number of questions here. I'll start off with one from Davina Gray. She's a recorder for the BSBI. Is there a similar recording facility for lichens?
Yes, there's actually the British Lichen Society has been running a scheme now for, oh goodness me, probably best part of 60 years. A guy called Mark Seward who kind of started it up, and it's been continuing. And now I think, so the British Lichen Society, they do have a big recording scheme that's been running for a long time. And all records are useful. It's not just, I can only send in the rare things, because in fact you find that some of the more common records on the Lichen Society kind of records, as it were, are the rare things. People say, this is where I'll send it in, but we want to know where the common things are as well. So every record helps.
Thank you. Now, I hope I can read this correctly. Petra Vergunst would like to know if rhizomes anchor rather than root lichens, why does the type and nutrient content of the substrate matter? Like, well, if it's rock or wood?
Yes, well, that's a good question, because it's said that actually lichens don't really take anything from the substrate, but it's something I've not really looked into, which I must do. I'll go off now and do that, because the substrate does have a very, very definite effect. So there are definite whole kind of assemblage of lichens which you see on limestone, and you do not get those on granite, you don't get them on sandstone or whatever, or basalt. So different rock types support different lichen assemblages, and different trees. You've got alder, which has rather acidic bark, will have a different assemblage from ash, which has a more sort of basic bark. And trees in Scotland, where it rains a lot, where everything's leached, so it tends to be quite acidic. So you get, particular lichens there that you don't see on the dry tree. So yes, it's an interesting thing. What is going on there? Because it is, I shall find out. They should find out, and if they find out, then they should let me know. Because all the books say, oh no, the substrate really doesn't have much of an influence, but it does, must do.
Andy Leggett would like to know if there is a practical reason, at least from the lichens' point of view, for their wide range of colours, as disguise seems unnecessary, as does attracting a mate.
Well, one of the things, for instance, the Xanthoria, which is the orange one that's everywhere because of the ammonia pollution, it produces the pigment, I think, as a protection against kind of UV. And when you find it in more shady areas, it actually is much more green, and there's much less of this sort of pigment. So there's I'm pretty sure that some of these pigments are actually produced as a protection, against UV and such like. But some of the others, like the one I showed the very first slide, actually, why are those little discs, spore producing discs, why are they bright red? Is there a particular reason for that? There's a tendency, we always tend to sort of think, well, there must be a reason for something, but sometimes things just are. But for Xanthoria, definitely, in really, really sunny places, it's really bright orange. In shady places, it can be green, and you could think it's a completely different lichen. They're so different.
Well, to continue about colours, is there a problem with sustainability from dye collecting?
No, I think
it's by Terry Cunningham. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's done on such a sort of small scale. If everybody started doing it, then there would be a problem. But it's not, and I think it's unlikely to really kind of take off. So British Lichen Society, they don't really sort of encourage mass collection of lichens, but a lot of these ones that are used for making dyes they're relatively rapidly growing. So as long as you don't take all of it, and like I say, it's done on a small scale. I don't know, Harris Tweed, I wonder where they get theirs from. Probably a trade secret.
Next one, Linda Seward would like to know, if I find lichens rolling around, like Ramalina, for example, would it help if I picked them up and hung them in a tree?
Yes, it would do. I tend to sort of sometimes do that, myself, because once they've become detached, their days are numbered. Although some of the ones, I think, not in this part of the world, but I think in some of the deserts of North America, you do get some lichens that are a bit like tumbleweed, and that's how they spread around. So you might say that, in fact, a windy day can actually potentially spread whole lichens, not just bits of them.
Thank you. Cremelda Dias would like to know, what do reindeer lichens grow on?
Oh, they tend to be on sort of peaty soils, particularly. So you'll see them on places. The reindeer lichens as a group, these cladonias, the very branching ones. Yeah, so cut over sort of rather dried out peat soils, sand dunes, places like that. So they're growing on sort of these kind of softer substrates. So they're not on rocks. And you get some of them actually growing on wood, old boots, a baseball glove. What was that? I saw somebody posted a baseball glove with some of the little, what's called pixie cups growing on. And they're another group within this cladonia group. So.
Okay. One from Brenda Thorne. Have medicines been made from lichen? And if so, what?
I don't know offhand, but it wouldn't surprise me if some have, or if there is research going on in that sort of field, because there are so many of these chemicals which are unique to lichens, and you just think, well, some of them may well have interesting properties, but it's not something I've actually kind of pursued. That's another thing I'll put on my list of things to check afterwards.
Okay. You mentioned some websites that were useful, but Elaine Mason would like to know if there is a book you would recommend as a beginner's introduction to lichens, explaining their groups, habitats, as well as basic ID.
The there's a field guide by a guy called Frank Dobson, not to be confused with the Labour politician of the same name, Frank Dobson. Actually, look,
Must have that book.
here's one I prepared earlier. No. So that's it. It's Lichens, an illustrated guide to British and Irish species. It is a substantial tome, and it can be a bit daunting when you just think, oh my goodness, yeah, there are a lot of lichens, but it's probably the best sort of field guide, because if you try and boil it down substantially less than this, it becomes almost like too simplistic, so you're not going to actually really find out much about it. There's some very good things you can download from the internet about Scottish rainforest lichens. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, if you go to just almost like Google Scottish lichens and Scottish mosses, there's a couple of these kind of handouts that will actually tell you. So, and I mean, those rainforests are fantastic. They're fantastic places to go to anyway. And one of the fantastic things about them is that quite a few of the lichens are really easy to identify. So you can go along and say, oh yes, that's such and such. Whereas some of the more common things can be a bit tricky. So you're very lucky to be up there, to be all those.
Then here's a couple of questions about the age. So David Chan would like to know, how long are lichens believed to have existed on planet Earth? And Davina Gray would like to know, how long do lichens live?
Oh, how long have they been around? There was something, goodness, the British Lichen Society, their kind of annual meeting, which was back in January, there was somebody talking about this. And I think they're reckoned to be about 400 million years or something that they've been around. But the lichen symbiosis, where you've got this alga or fungus partnering with an alga or a cyanobacterium, has almost certainly evolved more than once. But they've probably been around for at least 400 million years in one form or another. So yeah, how long do they last? Well, it's been claimed that some of these crusty lichens, like the map lichen, Rhizocarpum geographicum, it's been claimed that some of them are kind of several thousand years old. But yeah, I would say potentially they could be thousands of years old, the really, really slow growing ones. These are up on some of these glacial moraines where they're kind of measuring the retreat of the glacier, and they find some of these things. Yeah, so hundreds, if not thousands of years, potentially.
Yeah, thank you. And Peter Hardiman's question is, are any non-native lichens cultivated in botanic gardens in the UK?
I don't know about cultivated, but non-native lichens. I was involved in a lichen survey of where is it Prince Charles lives. Anyway, we what was it called? Highgrove. Was it? A few years ago, quite a few years ago, with British Lichen Society, we kind of surveyed his estate, you see, and there were a couple of these enormous kind of terracotta urns, and there were a couple of lichens on there that were not previously been found in Britain. And I think it was then discovered that in fact these had been imported from France, so they were non-native, as it were. I don't know that nobody kind of really cultivates lichens. There certainly are one or two that are reckoned to be. Yeah, they're not native. They've come in relatively recently.
Thank you. One from Laura Bax. Are there any fossil lichens?
Yes, yes, actually.
How old are they?
Well, yeah, go back. That's very good. That's jogged my memory again. That talk that I was at beginning of the year. There's some tiny little charcoalified fragments of lichens that have been found in what's called the Old Red Sandstone, which is about 400 million years old in Wales. So those are fossils, but they're not really very exciting at all. They're tiny fragments, millimetre or two at most. But quite a few lichens have now been found in amber, because amber is the kind of fossilized resin of trees. And the Baltic amber, which is comes from Baltic, you'd expect, is about 50 million years old, and that's actually produced quite a diverse flora of lichens, which have been engulfed by the tree resin. So yeah, there are fossil lichens, but that's a relatively recent thing. if you'd sort of asked me 20 years ago, we would have said no, virtually no fossil lichens are known, but now quite a lot more are.
And by question by Tim Curtis, do lichens compete with each other? And if they do, how do they do it?
They do compete actually, and you do sometimes see with some of these crustose lichens, you kind of see little dark bands, you know, almost like the warring factions between the two. So some can, you know, overwhelm others. You know, faster growing types can just effectively overgrow the slower growing types, particularly with the crustose ones. So yeah, there is going to inevitably be competition with you know, different lichens, and you know, the strongest wins, I guess, fastest growing or the one that shades out. You get a lot of higher plants, these evil higher plants. They can do terrible damage to lichens because you get ivy, for instance, growing over lichens, and the lichens can't then get the light. They need light because the algae need to photosynthesize, and if the light's blocked out by ivy or whatever, that can wipe them out. It's a big threat. And inversely, dormice are a big threat because you're not allowed to remove ivy from trees if there's dormice anywhere within 5 miles of the tree. And so even though there might be some really quite rare lichen, but there's a dormouse several miles away, so no, we can't remove it. So I'm being slightly facetious there, but yeah, so is competition with lichens as with everything else.
Well, here's a couple of questions on another theme. Joanne Carr would like to know if there are any good websites on lichens and folklore. And Davina Gray says, why don't we have common names for lichens? Should we start a campaign?
Well, the second one, there is actually, I think it's the British Lichen Society have actually put together a list of common names for the lichens, and they've gone through. So there's one of the things called Pseudocyphalaria crocata, which is speckled yellow belly or whatever. And there's another one, Crenum dichotum, which is called the river jelly lichen, because it is almost like little bits of jelly growing on rocks under the water. So they have put together a list of common names, so that might take off, but I'm kind of the old school. Before common names existed, there were about 6 common names for lichens when I started it. So I just got used to the and I'm a paleontologist, really deal with fossils, and there's not really common names for a lot of those species. So yes, if you look on the British Lichen Society website, I think there was a thing there about common names that have been created for them. The other thing about folklore, no, it's not something I've looked up. There almost certainly is stuff about folklore, because there's things, the devil's matchsticks and pixie cups and things like that. And then there's tree lungwort, which was used to cure lung disease because I suppose it looks like your lungs. So there will be stuff on that, but it's not something I've ever really looked at.
Now here's one from Cranston, in Cranston. Are any particular urban lichens on street trees or paths and walls beside pavements, etc., that are indicative by presence or absence of air quality? And does this impact, is this due to higher or lower vehicle emissions, e.g. around schools? Would they have been showing differences due to fall of traffic, etc., commuting routes in London and so on?
Yeah, well, because I talked about ammonia particularly, because ammonia is the big problem, but there's also nitrogen oxides, you see, which you get from cars, and they sort of have an effect on lichens as well. So I would think on very kind of busy routes where you're getting a lot of these what's called NOxes, gases, that would have an effect on the lichens that don't like nitrogen. And certainly it's the ones on trees really are the ones that are the best sort of indicators for sort of air quality. And there are certainly things, the stringy lichens, there's a thing called usnea. If you find bits of these stringy sort of hairy lichens called usnea, that's a really good indication that air quality is not too bad. As long as they're decent sized bits, more than just a sort of tiny little scrap. I mean, bits of usnea have been found in the grounds of Buckingham Palace now. Well, not that I've been there, but apparently they have. Yes, so the air quality in London has improved immensely since the 60s, but now it's threatened by these nitrogen oxides.
Thank you. I think you've talked about this already, but I'll ask it anyway. Sophie Furze's 8-year-old would like to know if lichens have any predators.
Yes, mollusks, snails, and slugs, and things like that. Particularly, they are the well, and of course, reindeer. Reindeer eat the things. But the main threat, main predator, I suppose, is slugs and snails. And so they kind of graze off the lichens. But in fact, it's thought that slugs are a way of what's the word, dispersing lichens, because the slug kind of munches away and it eats some of these bits of lichen, and some of the little mixes of fungal cells and algal cells just then come out in the slug poo at the other end. And the slug might not move very far because it's a slug, but it will deposit it somewhere else. And it is thought, I think one of the ideas about why some of these old woodland lichens are so slow to spread, and they really are. In the New Forest, there's areas of plantation there that were planted 300 years ago, and these old woodland lichens have only barely moved like 50, 100 meters into the woodland. Yeah, it's that slow. But it's thought that it might actually be slugs, old woodland slugs, particular species of slug, that are actually the main dispersals factors for these lichens. So they're being spread by slugs rather than spread by the wind or whatever. Slugs and snails, they're the menace.
Back to the theme of towns and cities, Sylvia Beswick would like to know if do planning applications take into account the removal of the lichens as well as removal of trees?
Not with a lot of the common lichens, they wouldn't, but I think that more and more kind of people who know there would be particular trees that have special lichens on them, in parts of Wales and such like, where individuals sort of kind of keep an eye on them and keep the various organisations informed. This tree is important because it has these lichens on it, but unless it's got something really rather special on it, I don't think it would cut much ice with most of the planners. There was a lichen, a little aside, there's a little lichen called a beautiful orange thing, Lichens chrysostomus. Told you they have horrible names. Beautiful little orange thing. And for a long time, there was one bush somewhere in Devon that had this thing on, and then the bush was removed when they widened the footpath. So that way, it was extinct in Britain. And then it reappeared probably about 10, 15 years ago, and it's been found in quite a lot of places now along the south part of England and in southern part of Ireland. So even though it was made extinct by cutting down a bush, footpath widening, it's back. It's climate change, it's warming, you see. It's the thing that likes it warm.
What about whiskey stores? John Adams asks if the black colour on trees near distillery whiskey stores is caused by a lichen.
Oh, well, I've not been to many of those. So, well, one of the problems actually with some of the whiskey distilleries is that they actually produce, they're a bit polluting, dare I say it. So it may be an absence of lichens. It may be an actual absence of lichens rather than the presence of them. Is that you would expect, if the air is reasonably good, you would expect up in those parts of Scotland to actually see a whole mosaic of different things all over the trees. And if you're not seeing that, that tells you something about the air.
It is true that the big store buildings on the outside, they're often very black.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah. Yeah. Right. If anyone wants to make any comments about tonight's our presentation or our festival as a whole, you're very welcome to do that too. There's still a couple of questions, some of which have partly been answered already. Like, for example, do tree lichens damage or affect the growth or life of its host tree at all, or are they symbiotic?
No, they don't. No, and I was so there's no evidence that the lichens actually do any damage to the trees. I'm saying with rock, they don't generally do much damage to that. There was one piece of stone, carved stone at Devonish Island that was suffering a bit, but all the rest of it There was it does more damage to remove the lichens than to leave them. And even if you remove them, they'll be back, as the Lichens stones show, although it's going to take another 5,000 years to get back to their former glory. I'll book my ferry crossing now. So.
Just one more question and then I'll read out some comments. Joanne Carr says that most lichenologists only manage to get as far as the car park on site visits because there are many to look at. How many visits have you been on and only managed to be in the car park?
Well, my great friend, this guy called Howard Fox, who is in Ireland, a lichenologist. He got me into lichens more than 30 years ago, and I owe a huge debt to him. I remember he and I back in September 1989, we were up in Donegal, and we parked our cars. Was it 7 miles apart? About 7 or 8 miles apart. You see, we're going to walk from one to the other, and we set off from his that morning. And as dusk fell, we were halfway between the two. We'd moved so slowly that, you know, in 8 or 9 hours, we'd gone about 3.5 miles. and it was getting dark. And it was all kind of a bit overgrown. But fortunately, his uncle only lived about half a mile away. So we just knocked on his door. Can you give us a lift? So yes, it does happen. You do tend to get, you have to make a conscious effort, right, we've got to go and escape from the car park, escape from this particular bit, but quite often you find that, you know, the best thing is in the car park.
I'll read out some comments here. Anne McKillop has said that the Plant Life Guides to Scottish Lichens is a good guide.
Yeah,
and
that's the ones I'm thinking of, yes.
Yeah. Sue Creech says a company in Switzerland, Waldwissen, harvest Pulmonaria lobaria for a cough mixture. They are also experimenting with sustainable harvesting.
Yes.
And from Elaine Mason, huge thanks for giving such a fascinating talk. Absolutely wonderful. I am keen to learn more. Thank you, and thank you to the organizers. Thank you. Sarah Sawyer says, desperate to get into the Knapdale woodlands and investigate now. Great talk. Thanks. Perfect mixture of knowledge and enthusiasm. Rona Moore, the black coating on the whiskey. She's got an answer to this. Whoops. Sorry, there we go. Rona knows that the black coating on the whiskey stores is usually said to come from the angel's share evaporation.
Oh.
Yep. Really informative. Thank you. Fabulous talk. And lots of lovely thanks here. I'll just have a quick look.
I was going to say actually about
thank you very much for all these thank yous as well. And I think we'll start wrapping up. Yeah. Thank you.
I was going to say Knapdale's a fantastic place to go to. Most friends of mine live there, and I remember went over to their little tiny patch of garden with some scruffy apple trees in it, and had the most amazing lichens on it. Yes.
Well, thank you all for attending, and a huge thank you to you,
my pleasure,
Dr. Mike Sims, for this fascinating presentation. A little plug from me now. This is our first ever online digital Caithness International Science Festival, and it has been running all of this month. And most of the presentations have been recorded, and they are available as videos on our website, www.science03.org. So please do go and view any that you might have missed. Our final live event is on Wednesday, and it is called Maths versus Sport. This will be presented by Dr. Tom Crawford, who will answer questions such as what is the fastest speed a human will ever run a marathon, and how to take the perfect penalty kick. And now let me take this opportunity to thank Nicola MacLeod, our festival coordinator, who has put all of this together and has facilitated each and every one of these many talks. presentations this month. Also, thanks, Garance, for helping. And thank you again, Dr. Mike Sims. I hope we will see you sometime soon in Caithness and face to face. Thank you very much, everybody.